Welcome to everybody who's joined us so far. My name is Monica Inzer. I'm lucky enough to be the Vice President for Enrollment Management here at Hamilton College. I'm joined with my two great colleagues who are going to introduce themselves in a minute, say a little bit about their experience and their roles at Hamilton, but also the wisdom they're bringing to tonight's panel. So I'm going to let them say more in a minute. But the thing I want to talk about is, first of all, why we're calling this, as those who are still coming in, the room where it happens. This is a conversation with the leadership team from Hamilton's Admission and Financial Aid Office. And we are the one college in the country that can use Hamilton the musical more than any other place. And so we find ways to slip songs from the musical. If you're a Hamilton Broadway show junkie, you'll know "Don't Miss Your Shot" is something we say a lot around here, and the room where it happens. And so because you're with the leadership team that gets to, is lucky enough to consider your applications, we thought we would call tonight's event the room where it happens. And as it turns out, Peaches Valdez, our Dean of Admission, is actually in the room where it happens. So Peaches, why don't you start and introduce yourself?
Thanks, Monica. Hello, everyone. It's great to see so many people here. My name is Peaches Valdez. I'm the Dean of Admission at Hamilton. I am entering my 4th year here at the college, but I've been in admission for over 20 years. I was at a previous institution, which was my alma mater, for about 17. So I'm excited to be on tonight's panel. Looking forward to the conversation.
Can you do a quick zoom around the room to show them the room where it happens?
I can.
There you go. There's the conference room. There's Alexander Hamilton on the wall.
Oh, yeah.
That's the admission. That's where the admission office meets to consider applications. So that literally is the room where it happens. Okay, good job. Cameron, please introduce yourself.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. My name is Cameron Feist. I'm the Associate Vice President for Enrollment Management and Director of Financial Aid. I am the lone Hamilton grad on this distinguished panel. And have worked for the college on and off since I graduated, taking a brief stint to serve as a director of college counseling at a K-12 independent school. I also had the chance to serve on the admissions side of the desk. So I look forward to a really great conversation tonight, an opportunity to answer all of your questions.
Great, thank you both. So again, Peaches, because I know people are still coming in, is our Dean of Admission, and Cameron is Associate Vice President, but also Director of Financial Aid. So they have some respective questions that they will answer, but we're all going to answer questions on this topic of finding a college. We know this is on your minds right now. We know that in a normal year, this can be a stressful process and sometimes a little bit of fun. And this year has thrown some curveballs and some challenges, and you're doing this with less information available to you. You may be a little delayed in your college search process because your schools have been remote, or you haven't taken standardized testing, or you haven't gotten out to visit schools. We know that. First of all, you're in good company. Lots of people are impacted that way. Our worlds are changed as well, and we're trying to figure out how to support you and do things differently so that you don't feel as scared about the process, given all the uncertainty right now with a global pandemic. And one of the reasons we're doing this event tonight is just to reassure you that we are here for you. We want to answer your questions. We want to support you. We want to make sure you understand there are people like us out there, not just at Hamilton, but at lots of great colleges who are here to support you and help you navigate this process. I promise we're going to talk a lot about Hamilton, and that's the vantage point, the lens we look through and the vantage point we have, and really what we're experts about. So we don't try to pretend we're experts about other colleges, but given that you heard a little bit about Peach's experience and Cameron's as well, my own, I've been doing this for over 30 years at different types of schools. On the admission side, served as a director of financial aid at a secondary school. And so between the three of us, we have 70 years of experience. I still feel like we're learning every year from you, from the students, from the parents, from the families going through the process, and the process evolves too. But we're going to try and give you some general advice that's not just about Hamilton, but hopefully helps you take a breath, helps you feel like you can do this, and gives you some general advice about how places like Hamilton are approaching the process and are recommendations for how you might navigate it as a family. We had 500 people sign up for this event. I'm not sure if we're going to hit our cap. We hope that we have enough room in our Zoom account to have everybody and the parents here, but we welcome you all. We're going to try and get to your questions. As you know, if you registered for this event in the last few days, we asked you on the registration form for your questions, and we are prioritizing those questions as we go through the conversation this evening. So I have a whole list of ones that we know you've asked, then there are a few other ones that we think you should have asked, and then we're going to be taking questions also in the forum. So you'll see in the bottom of your Zoom screen, you've got a Q&A box. We've got two colleagues, Jack Nivison and Brenna May, who are great admission counselors who are there on standby to tell us what to do to manage your questions. They may answer some questions for you if you put them in there, and they may also pass them on to us to ask as well. So feel free to ask questions in the box of Brenna and Jack, and we'll keep things going. So I'm going to start, and maybe this will help people understand the topics. Let me give you the general topics. We're going to first talk about finalizing lists, looking at colleges. I know some of you have already applied to colleges, and some of you are still putting together and assembling your list. Don't worry, you've got plenty of time still if you're in that latter camp. But this first topic is going to be about finalizing your list, determining fit, particularly in a pandemic, and how you do that and what our advice is. And there's a few questions around that. The next topic is around standardized testing and altered learning this year, some of the changes you're feeling or experiencing because of the pandemic. Then we're going to talk about applying to college, which includes both the admission application and financial aid for many of our candidates, and our selection process, and then a few other questions at the end that we'll throw in. So that's kind of how we're going to go through. So if it sounds like we're not talking about standardized testing, just know we're going to get to it eventually. So I'm going to jump in and say the first question about finalizing lists. How can students determine fit, a word we use a lot in admissions, and families use it as well, if they're unable to visit campuses? Because so much of this is you get a feel when you're on campus or you see the students and you get to talk to them. How can they determine that if they're unable to visit? I'm going to start with you, Peaches.
Thanks, Monica. So we get this question a lot. I feel like I've been answering this question quite a bit. And I think the thing is that as a result of the pandemic, we've had to pivot, and we've had to reevaluate how we've recruited students and how we've connected and engaged with them. And so I think one of the things that we've done is and many colleges and universities in the country have done this, is really build a robust virtual set of offerings. And I think the thing is, in the end, it's not going to be able to replace that in-person experience that we are so accustomed to, the idea of being on campus and really having that gut feeling. At the same time, I think this opportunity has allowed us to be really creative, thinking about how do we think about engaging with the college students, and how do we connect college students with prospective students, and how do we show them those various aspects of our community that may in a normal year may take a couple extra clicks, but now we're creating them so they're automatically available to students. Again, I don't think it's going to replace a full on-campus visit, but the thing is that all colleges and universities are experiencing this, and it's not just solely one or two. So I think in regards to fit, I think it's really taking advantage of all the virtual offerings, thinking creatively, maybe looking at various colleges' YouTube channels, looking at their social media accounts, looking at connecting with current students on campus that we provide students access to. So I think there are a variety of ways to help students kind of flesh out, what place would they feel that would be that best fit. And in the end, I think there's also, and I think this happens every year, there's also just a sense of leap of faith. Like, you've done your research, you've exhausted the opportunities and resources available, and sometimes you just have to close your eyes and take that step.
Good. Cameron, anything you want to add about that? And maybe you can also answer, and from your college counseling days as well, what sources of information are the best for families?
Sure. Well, I love Peach's answer. I also feel like we have to start with an acknowledgement that this is hard, right? This is really hard for students to figure out. We always really valued that opportunity to meet students face-to-face on our campus, shepherd them around our campus, and give all of you the opportunity to walk the sidewalks as prospective students and start to visualize what that would look like as enrolled students. but there are, to Peach's point, really great resources out there for you. And you may not have an opportunity to come here, but if you piece together enough of these resources, you're going to get a pretty good sense of what we as an institution are all about. I would say the other opportunity is if you attend a school that has a college counselor who sent students to Hamilton before, or maybe has been to our campus at some point, they're a great resource for you to lean on. If not, obviously, we want you to spend some time on the Hamilton website and try to get a sense of what we have to offer based on everything that Peaches has outlined there.
Yep. And I think there are some tools in addition to going to each of the individual sites that gather information for families. So, we're not a big fan of rankings because they put some schools above others, and you should find your own measuring stick, not what some guidebook says. But there's a lot of information available in those tools that allow you to line up colleges side by side so you can look at their majors or the size or their retention rates or various things that might be of interest to your family. And then there are profiles of schools. So Niche, NICHE, is a tool that a lot of students use. And we see a lot of students who get interested in Hamilton from that. Hobson's has a portfolio with information about schools. The College Board uses My Big Future. So I think there are a few places you can go to get generic information if you want to just be on the website. But when you get further down the process, you do want to spend time on the school's sites. And Peaches mentioned a lot of the types of things schools are doing. Tonight I was looking at survey data from students who've been doing virtual visits for Hamilton. And we do something called Continental Chats, where they can chat with tour guides. And another thing we do is major meetups, where you can talk to students who are in various disciplines and majors. And those are big hits for students. They're finding answers to questions, but they're also connecting and talking to different types of people. And I think that's the key. The more of that you can do, you actually can get a feel. And the last thing I'd say on this is, maybe you're going to apply to schools that you don't yet know if they're a perfect fit. And you might wait until you see where you get in and visit on the other side. We're all hoping, I'm knocking on wood here, that in the spring, everyone's going to be able to visit colleges again. Let's hope there's a vaccine and things will move forward, and you'll be able to get out to some of the schools where you've been admitted and explore fit again from a different vantage point when you've been offered admission. So another question along experiencing campus and thinking about trying to picture yourself somewhere is, right now we're looking through the COVID lens. And so the question that has been submitted was, what is the experience during COVID been on campus? And for Hamilton in particular, is it safe for students considering going away to college, maybe a distance from home? Is Hamilton a safe place? And in general, should they be putting their search on hold right now? What do we think about that? So Peaches, I'm going to start with you again.
One, I don't think, I wouldn't pause. I think that there are a number of resources available to students. I think that Hamilton specifically, I will say that I'm very fortunate to be at an institution that is so concerned about the safety of every single member, right, from students, faculty, and staff. I think they've been, the senior staff, Monica, along with the president and the other vice presidents, and the campus itself have made really amazing efforts to make sure and ensure that students are safe. And so I think that's, regarding daily monitoring and also testing, de-densifying, bringing in modular housing for students. That's the one thing I think we're very fortunate to also be located in a region that is a little bit more rural. And so it's a little bit, I think that we, in comparison to other parts of the state, we're in a place that's nestled in this nice little sweet spot where we're able to be open and we're able to function. It's not to say that we're not, being compliant and not following guidelines, but we've been able to have that balance. And I think students have truly wanted to be here. Many of our returning students had to leave in the middle of March. And so now they want to be back, and they're working very hard to make sure that they can stay on campus. And so the one thing I'm impressed with is the fact that our students wear masks. You see them walking around on campus. I think it also helps right now that there was a little snowstorm, so it's keeping your face a little bit warmer. But I think the thing is, you see students wearing masks. You see students regularly showing up for the testing. You have people checking in on each other, and there's a lot of checking in just to make sure that people, making sure that people are doing well, both just mentally and also physically. So, so I think I will say that we're very fortunate to be on a campus that's so focused on staying open, being open to all of our students, and making sure that we stay safe.
Yeah, I would say I'm always proud of Hamilton students. You know, it's like a proud parent. We admit them, and so we hand them off to the rest of the community, and we're really proud of our students. I've never been more proud of students than I am right now, because they are taking care of each other. They are taking care of this community. They have sacrificed a lot to be on campus, but they think it's worth it, and they know it's worth it. Their academic program, staying on track with their learning and keeping the long-term view is serving them well and serving us well. And I would encourage the students looking at college right now to do the same. That the thing that you can do right now is plan for your future. There's a lot up in the air, but we're here for you. Stay strong, stay planning forward with your goals, and don't be deterred. So along those lines, we do have some students, and Cameron, I'm going to throw this one at you, who are experiencing family hardship based on the economy right now, or we obviously have health concerns with the pandemic, but there also is a hurricane right now. And so there are people who are kind of rocked in their process. And what experience do we have for anyone who's got some barriers right now that is preventing them from moving forward?
Yep, that's a great question. And we're getting some version of that question every day, multiple times a day, as you can imagine. And I just wanted to add to the previous question real fast, if I can, that I live on campus and I'm raising little kids on campus, and a lot of us do that. And this feels like an incredibly safe place, not just because of the robust testing program, but to Peaches and Monica's point, students are really owning this moment and are really being accountable for their behavior. So whenever I take my kids for walks through the Glen, which is a several mile pathed area associated with the college right next door, whenever we walk past another student, they're always wearing their mask. And so they're doing it outside, even where in places that are traditionally pretty safe. But regarding the financial hardships that families are facing right now, we fully recognize this is an incredibly challenging time for students who apply to college, and it's an incredibly intimidating process for families to think about affording college when they may have financial resources that have changed dramatically recently. So one of the challenges when you're applying for financial aid is all the income information is old. So for students who are applying for financial aid, who are going to matriculate this coming fall, we're going to be looking at your 2019 income information, and that's because we have to. That's what the forms are going to ask you to fill out. However, after you fill out those forms, after you gain admission to the college, you're going to have an opportunity to have another conversation with us, to share with us if your resources have changed, and we welcome those conversations because we're really making every attempt possible to meet students and families where they are. So we have a very well articulated what's called financial aid appeal process, where families can notify us of changes to resources. We collect a little bit of documentation, and then we may be able to make an adjustment to their aid eligibility. But this is something we're really accustomed to. We were accustomed to it before the pandemic hit, but it has certainly ramped up in a big way starting in March. So we're here, we're ready, we've got a good process, and we're open to working with students and families wherever they are.
Great, thank you. And I'll just add that I think sometimes it can be so overwhelming in the moment. So if you're experiencing a natural disaster, if you're experiencing pandemic, if your parent might get laid off, or you're scared they might get laid off, it's easy to say, I'm not going to go to college right now, or let me just pause everything. But things may change a month from now or 2 months from now, and you want to make sure you have options. So at this point in the process, all you're doing is providing yourself with paths that you could choose later. So applying to colleges, staying focused, keeping your goals in mind just gives you options later. You don't want to now limit your options that you're going to have a few months from now for next fall. And I think it's really helpful to know that things could change. They will change. They are going to get better, and to not get overwhelmed by the moment. We know that many applicants, not all, but many applicants are delayed in their search because they weren't in school in the spring of their junior year. They may still not be in school. They may be virtual. They may not have taken standardized testing and they haven't visited schools, as we mentioned earlier. And so they may be doing things later in the process. You still need to apply though, and get your foot in the door, and you can worry about some of those other pieces later. But one thing you can do on the front end, back to you, Cameron, about financial aid, the question that came in is, if financial aid is a factor for my family, how do I know on the front end if a college is affordable?
Sure. So on our website, there are two resources. One is called the My Intuition Quick College Cost Estimator, and that's going to ask you just 6 questions. And based on your feedback to those questions, it's going to provide you a range of financial aid eligibility for students who have gone through the process at Hamilton, and a range of what they have qualified to receive based on those 6 questions. And then after you complete that, we hope that you will take the time to invest in completing our net price calculator, which is going to take a little bit more time. In all likelihood, you're going to need to sit down with, file tax returns, and we're going to point you to specific lines, and we're going to try to make it as easy as possible. But we're going to get pretty specific with the questions there, because our end goal is to provide families with as accurate an estimate of their aid eligibility as we possibly can. So those are 2 really great resources to use. And bear in mind that every college in the country has a net price calculator out on their website. So once you have your finalized list of colleges to which you plan on applying, it's a really good exercise to go through and complete the net price calculator at each college, because each college has their calculator tied into their institution's methodology for determining aid eligibility.
Great. And I'm just going to do a little commercial for our financial aid, which reports to Cameron. We are very generous with financial aid. Access is important to Hamilton. We meet 100% demonstrated financial need. And so many families will find they're surprised by just how affordable Hamilton might be, more than they realize. So again, this is in the spirit of, don't put things on hold because you think you can't afford it. Check all these options out. Look under the rocks, do our net price calculator, talk to us if you have changes in circumstances so we can help you see what things might look like before you rule out colleges. Okay, and there was one more question. I don't have access to a guidance counselor right now who can help me, and I would say that's why we're here tonight. Right. Admission officers that see their job as to provide a bridge between applicants and the college where they work, to answer questions, to support them through the process. And that's not unique to Hamilton. And so I would say reach out to admission officers at the colleges where you're looking. We have a list of all of our staff. As I said, we've got 2 of them answering questions in the chat behind the scenes here, but they are there to answer questions. They often will be assigned based on geographic territories, because that's how they will travel when we do things like that and read applications. And I think it would be a smart thing to reach out to them if you need help and advice. And if you find you're at a school where you're not getting that kind of attention, that's indicative of what your experience will be like at that college later too. And so I think how you're treated through the admission process sometimes gives you a sense of the type of experience you'll have when you arrive. Okay, we're going to switch gears and head to standardized testing. It's a really big question right now. Many students have not had access to the SAT or the ACT in the same way that they have in recent years, or the class before them did. Some of them have taken the test once, but they haven't gotten a chance to take it again, and others haven't taken it at all. The good news is many colleges, Hamilton included, have waived their testing requirement. And in response to this, we know that this is a circumstance beyond your control that we do not want to hold you accountable for. And we want to remove that barrier for you, that obstacle. We want you to have one less thing to worry about in a year when there's a lot to worry about. So at Hamilton, you can submit your SAT, you can submit your ACT, or you cannot submit testing and still consider your application would still be considered complete. But people are asking, so what does that mean? If I'm test optional, what does this mean? Peaches, I'm going to throw that to you.
No, we get this question. We've been getting this question about, what does test optional really mean? Are you really test optional? And those various ways of asking, we're test optional. That means that if you as a student choose not to submit your scores, we are not going to be sitting there in committee saying, why didn't Cameron send his scores? No, we are going to be looking at your application and the other contents, the various pieces in your application. we just won't have test scores, and that is very much at a student's discretion and choice. If you choose to use test scores as part of it, you submit them to us, we will use them. And again, it's one of those additional points that we will have just as other parts of additional information. So again, it is really at the student's discretion as to whether or not they want to submit them or didn't have the ability to provide them. So, but again, we're not going to place any judgment on a student if they choose to not submit tests.
Great response. I'm just going to reiterate what you said. Optional means optional. That you don't have to, if you have scores and you don't think they're a good reflection of your ability, you don't have to submit them this year. And if you don't have scores, you don't have to feel bad about not submitting them. I also want to say that we understand the circumstances under which students have been tested this year, that you may not have access to preparation. You may not, again, take the test multiple times. And we don't anticipate that scores are going to be as high as they have been in recent years. So if you look at the middle 50% that we publish for our average SAT or our average ACT on our website, because we're trying to be transparent. First of all, in a normal year, that's your middle 50% for the students who enroll, and there's 25% above and 25% below. When we do require testing, we don't have cutoffs. We have a huge range. It's one piece of the application. And in a weird way, by making it optional, it's almost put too much of a spotlight on this because students are trying to figure out whether they should submit. I would say if you feel good about your scores, or if you want to submit your scores, trust us to review them in the context of this year, and that we know you might have only taken them once, or we will also see the date associated with your scores. So if it was taken in the fall of your junior year and you never could have a testing site near you open again, we're going to know that that test was your fall of your junior year test, and we're going to review it in that context. So trust us to know that. Another question, Peaches, is it okay for students to self-report scores if they do choose to submit them?
Absolutely. And this is something that we had even pre-COVID. So students can submit self-reported scores. And then should they be admitted to the college and enroll, then we would need an official report. So definitely students can provide us their scores. I think the one thing I would also want to add, Monica, to some of the things that you've been talking about with testing is that we're talking specifically about Hamilton's policy. So it's really important that you reach out. If you're applying to multiple schools, you need to ask them, individual schools, as to what their testing policy is going to be. They may not require testing as part of admission. They might be test optional for admission, but there might be other things that they might need testing for, such as merit scholarships, for example. So again, I think this process requires students in general to be invested consumers with their families and to do the research behind and ask the questions. If anything, I think this year is definitely one to be asking for more clarification.
Yeah, excellent point. I just want to piggyback on standardized testing to say there are other things about your learning in the last year or two, your junior year and into your senior year, that we know are altered. Your school, we're seeing schools in our own community here across New York State and in other states scrambling to try and figure out how to deliver education to you. Sometimes it's all online, sometimes it's hybrid, sometimes you go in 2 days a week. We know sometimes it's pass fail. The courses available to you are different. Your access to teachers are different. You might not have the mentors available to you in the same way. We know that. We recognize that. And where you live may impact this too, that the pandemic, it is not evenly impacting families across the country. Sometimes it's the resources available to you or your school or your community, whether it's urban or rural. And we get that. And so we're going to make it our job to know the context from which you're coming, your environment, your school. There are questions added to the application for you to add information about this, and also for your counselor. We have some tools to understand a little bit about the environment you're coming from, both your neighborhood and your school, that'll give us context to your application. So again, trust us on this. We know it. I don't want you to feel like we're out here holding people to the same standards, testing and otherwise. We understand that we're going to review it collectively in your application within the context of this year to try and make sense of how you're tapping into the resources available to you, how you're doing in spite of all of these challenges. And that kind of brings us to the next question, which is a big one. We talk often about reviewing applications within the context of them. So where are students coming from, their family circumstances, all kinds of things that impact a student's ability to learn. And we call that context in an application. But often it's referred to as, I think, the most overused word in college admission, which is holistic. It's actually an accurate description of what we do, because it means we don't just admit by test score or by GPA or by rank. We're looking at also what your teachers say about you, what you say, your how you've spent your time, your family responsibilities. There's a lot we look at when we review an application holistically, because we don't just have a cutoff. But I think it's so overused that sometimes people glaze over and don't understand what that means. And so it makes sense, I think, to explain that. So hopefully that was a good explanation. Cameron, Peaches, I invite you to jump in from your years of reading applications to say more if you'd like.
I will only offer that from my years on the college counseling side, I really appreciated both the fact that that was an overused term, and that I was really proud of the work that my alma mater has always done and continues to do to truly live up to that term and really review each applicant and give every applicant the time that they deserve for a proper and complete review.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Another question that has come in related to testing and how we read applications is, what would we use instead of testing? Do you want to take that first, Peaches?
Sure, absolutely. So one thing at Hamilton is that we're not asking for any type of substitute for testing. And so what we'll be doing is, in general, as we're looking at all the various components of the student's application, we're going to, apply even more scrutiny to the level of, to the student's transcript. It's going to give us a context of, and we keep on saying context, but it will give us background and understanding of where the student is coming from, what has been available to them. So we're going to be looking at the rigor of the courses. We're going to be looking at how they performed over a series of years. So it's not just within the last year, it's actually looking from their freshman until into their senior year. And so we'll have that very, we'll see the progression, we'll see the story of them for over 3.5 years of how the student's doing. And so we'll be looking primarily at the academic component as part of that. But we're going to be looking at the circumstances surrounding that as well. So it's not just about, we're going to be looking at some of the changes that have been made as a result of COVID. Your high schools, along with the transcript, your high school is going to will provide us a profile. Your counselors are going to be providing context as well. So all of these things are going to be used as we're evaluating the academic pieces of your application.
Good job. I agree. I think, again, being test optional has put this weird spotlight on testing that's unintended. It doesn't count for nearly as much as people think it does. And I don't think our decisions are going to be entirely different than they were when we had testing. Testing is a good predictor of success at Hamilton, but again, within context and with a wide range of test scores that our students submit and that we admit students with. So I am pretty sure there are students who are going to get in who might not have in the past because they don't have to submit testing. And that's a good thing in my mind. But I think that's going to be around the margins. And for the most part, we're going to value the single most important part of the application, which is your academic record, the courses you've taken, the rigor, the grades you've achieved, and how you've approached your schoolwork and demonstrated your potential, your ability and your potential to us. Another question, just to move off of the testing right now, but still sticking with the application and all the pieces and components of an application that we consider. We care a lot about, once we determine someone can do the work at Hamilton, they're a competitive candidate, we're selective. And so we're looking beyond that at students who are going to contribute to this community in meaningful ways. And students have had less of an opportunity to demonstrate that in the last 6 months and maybe continuing on this fall, because they've had to forego their activities, their sports in some cases, leadership opportunities, maybe even jobs, and certainly summer responsibilities. So how will we account for that, and what do we think about that? I'll start with you, Peaches.
Again, the pandemic has impacted everyone. And so we're not going to be surprised if you had to suspend some of the activities that you've been involved in. I think what's interesting, what I've been seeing and talking to students recently is how, in light of having to forego some of their activities that they may have done in the past, what have they done since then as a result of this? Like maybe they took, maybe they took on more, they pursued interests that they necessarily didn't have the time to do before, but now they have the time. Or maybe they've reevaluated how they value their time and how they spend it. So I think the thing is that we're going to, what will be helpful is to know, the students will report that information on their application and will understand that there was a pause. But then, it'll be interesting to see how other students have pivoted and find different ways to express interest in a particular area. Maybe they took on more, maybe they were able to continue their work but virtually, or maybe they decided, I really don't understand why I spent so much time doing this activity, and I found this other interest. It'll be interesting to see how students have pivoted, but again, it's like something, penalize a student for something they can't control. And then again, it's one of the things that, as I've been telling students, control what you can control. You can't control the pandemic's impact on your ability to participate in activities. And so trust the admission committee to be conscious and aware of that and empathetic in many ways. I always like to say that this is a human process. There are humans behind the screen reading your applications. And so there is pre-COVID and even after COVID, there has always been this level of humanity and empathy in this process and understanding.
That's great. Cameron, anything you want to add here?
That this strikes me as a great opportunity for students to share with us through those other means like an essay or through an interview, the things about which they are passionate and the things that they would bring to our community in terms of their involvement. And I'll also just echo something that Peaches just briefly touched on, which is we have a fabulous admission team. And what they do for a living is piece through an application to try to figure out who are going to be the great fits on our campus. So put this on us to do some of that work for you, but also don't miss the opportunities to celebrate what you have done or what you would have done had this pandemic not hit.
That's great advice.
Don't miss your shot, right, Cameron?
Yes, don't miss your shot. I just want to add, when I'm asked, what about the fact that I don't have a long list of activities because they're just not available to me, I frankly find that a little bit refreshing. Students for a long time have been just over-programmed, and I hope the pandemic is a little bit of a reset for us on academics being first and foremost and a couple of things that you can do well. My own son is a college sophomore, and when he got sent home in March, we had a great heart-to-heart about the fact that he's got a lot more time on his hands, and many of the parents on the Zoom, and Peaches and Cameron and I remember when 9/11 happened. And that was a moment in time where we can all remember where we were and how it impacted us. Well, this pandemic is as devastating for sure, and as far-reaching and significant, but it's over an expanded period of time. And so for years, you're going to think about how you spent your time during the pandemic. And you don't want the answer to be that you hung out on the sofa playing PlayStation, as I said to my son. He didn't, for the record. But you don't want that to be your answer. And so this is a great time to teach yourself the ukulele, or to write in a journal, or to take walks, or to get into shape, or to figure out something different about yourself. The college admission process is a great time of self-reflection. And I think you can use your time wisely right now to prepare for college and to spend your time thinking about that. Our motto is know thyself at Hamilton. And we don't expect anyone to really know thyself, especially when they're applying to college. It's about that act of learning. And I think use your time wisely and don't feel like you have to fill a long list of activities. Discuss with us what your goals are and talk about it in the application, and trust us with that. Speaking of talking about it in the application, another great line from another great song from the Broadway musical is "Who Tells Your Story?" Mm-hmm. And one of my favorite songs. We often refer to that because we just can't let this pass. It's the musical songs are too good for us to pass them by. But "Who Tells Your Story" can often refer to your essay, mm-hmm. and your voice, whether it's, as Cameron said, the interview or the essay, or the supplemental essays that colleges will sometimes have, or the other supplemental pieces. Hamilton allows you to upload a video or to submit a supplemental essay after you apply, different ways that you can bring your application to life. So Peaches, I wonder if you could say a little bit about those components and their importance in the process and our selection process.
Sure. I think throughout the application process and the various pieces, we are going to be hearing from everyone about a particular student. We're going to hear from their counselors, from their mentors, from their coaches, from their teachers, from admissions officers who have met these students. And then some of the parts that Cameron has mentioned regarding the essay and the interview, the personal URL, these are probably my favorite pieces. Because that's when we get to hear the student's story. We get to hear how they view themselves, how they see themselves. We get to see them in a lens that other people don't see them in. We get to see the sincerity and authenticity of the student themselves. And so I think, with the essay, I think there's so much pressure placed on the essay itself, the college essay, the personal essay. But as I remind students is that there are no wrong answers to this. This is your experience. This is how you make yourself distinct within the application pool, and you'll get to show and share a part of yourself with the admission committee. My nephew is applying to college this year, and so I was fortunate to get to see his essay, and it was great because I saw him in a lens that I don't normally see him. I know he's a very kind and young man, very smart, but at the same time, there is it's someone who is definitely showing a level of persistence and tenacity, and it was interesting to see him in that lens. And so I think the thing is that that's the story he's going to be sharing to the admission committees he applies to. With the interview, it's the same thing. You're having this amazing conversation with an alum or a current student or an admission officer, and all the answers, the answers to the questions. They're about you. And so again, it's another way for you to share a piece of yourself and show why you would be a good fit for that particular institution. I think the same with the personal URLs. The idea is that you're helping build this story. You're bringing in your own voice along with the many other voices who are going to be talking about you through this process. And so I think students, if they, what I appreciate about Hamilton's approach to it is that we give 3 ways to show your interest in Hamilton and express who you are through the supplemental pieces. And we know that students are coming from different backgrounds and different strengths. So you may not be someone who would want to do an interview, but writing is your strength, or maybe you're into digital media and that is your strength, and you're going to share those pieces with us. So I like the level of diversity that we provide students, but in the end, I think all these pieces just help build onto the story, and if anything, pull the other pieces together.
Great. Cameron?
Yeah, I guess I have a follow-up question for you, Peaches, which is that I imagine, given the number of students who are on the Zoom tonight, that some of the students on are saying, you're talking a lot about extracurricular activities, but I've only ever worked during high school. How does that play out during the application? How is that taken into consideration? I think I know this answer, but I thought they should hear it from the dean.
Sure. No, I mean, I think the thing is that we think about as activities outside of class. How do you invest your time? I think, I had, I think the students who, sometimes I have to tell students that just because you aren't able to participate in activities doesn't mean you're not engaged and you're involved and you're having an impact. If you have a job, if you are taking care of family members, people rely on you. That's a level of, that people depend on you as a student. So if you have a regular babysitting job or you're going home to take care of your younger siblings, that's valuable. That shows, some of these softer skills like time management, the ability to be organized, be able to connect with a variety of people if you're working. So again, it's not just about what are you involved in school, how are you engaged outside of class in general. So I see them all as important.
Excellent. I'm glad you pointed that out, Cameron, and I agree completely. I think that one of the questions that was submitted in advance was about demonstrated interest. And that is a term that some of you probably have never heard of, but others have heard it thrown around. And so let's demystify it for a moment. Colleges, particularly highly selective colleges, have more than enough qualified applicants. And sometimes they're looking for students who are a good fit. The ultimate form of demonstrated interest, of course, is early decision. Because when you apply early decision and you commit to a college, you're saying, I've looked at all the colleges out there and you're my top choice. And that is a commitment you've made to that college. We're going to come back and talk about early decision in a minute, but not everybody can do that. And not everyone can demonstrate interest right now. Certainly, it might not be safe to come visit campuses. You can do some of these virtual options. And at Hamilton, we care about fit more than we care about demonstrated interest. I also like to say, we care, what bothers us more than, that sways us more than anything is demonstrated disinterest, which could help you not get admitted when you have not taken advantage of any of the opportunities to engage with us, or when we give you an opportunity to submit supplemental pieces to your application and you've done none of them, when the essay you write about Hamilton is about another college. And so those things will work against you more than demonstrated interest may help you. But in the end, we're looking for ways to see fit. And so taking advantage of these opportunities, being thoughtful when crafting an essay, scheduling an interview when it's recommended, if you can, they're done via video. We recommend that, and it's a way for you to have a conversation. You don't have to feel like it has to be perfect. Cameron, you interviewed students for years when you were on the admission side. In fact, the admission fellows who did the interviews reported to you. And I think you can say a little bit about what we expect in an interview, and that students don't have to be perfect. So please chime in.
Sure. You know, when I used to prep students of mine to go off to do their college interviews, I would remind them that the pressure in the interview setting is really on the person asking the questions. It's on them to engage the other person. It's not on you to engage them, which isn't to say you shouldn't, you know, offer full and complete answers, but just bear in mind that we train people to go into this room and have a conversation with you. And that's really what it's all about, is getting into a room and learning a little bit more about who you are beyond what we can read in your application when it is submitted to the college. So it's a time for you to, you know, if the interviewer is doing a good job, it's a time for them to really flesh out from you, what are the things that you're really interested in? How are some of the ways that you may contribute to our community once you get here? What are the things you're curious about as you're starting to look at Hamilton or college in general? But it's really intended to be just a conversation that will, and we keep using the word context, but we'll add that additional context to your application when it comes time for your application to be reviewed for admission.
Great, thank you. So I want to come back to early decision as promised. Someone asked, who should apply early decision? And what if Hamilton is my top choice, but I can't apply early decision because for financial aid reasons, or because I'm not able to visit? What would you say to that, Peaches?
That's a good question. I think the thing is that something I said earlier. I mean, you may not be able to visit campus, but I think if you've done your thorough research, I think if you've with the various offerings, I think that if you have used the tools that Cameron has mentioned and Monica have mentioned regarding the net price calculator, if you've been engaged with us, you've asked your questions, I think if you've done all of that and the only thing you haven't done is visited campus, I think if Hamilton is your top school or the X school is your top school, then you take that opportunity, you take advantage of that. I think in regards to what I was saying earlier, that sometimes this is all about, you know, you've vetted it, you've educated yourself, you've worked with your family, you've had those very, you know, difficult conversations, you've decided you still want to apply early decision. It still requires a leap of faith in the end.
Yeah, I think you got to trust yourself at some point, because you can overthink it, and particularly with so much uncertainty right now. On the other hand, I want to reassure people who feel like they shouldn't apply early decision, or their parents won't let them because there's too much uncertainty in their family right now, or we may be a distance from their family and travel's uncertain. That's okay too, that they can still apply regular decision. We love early decision applicants because they've said Hamilton's their top choice, but we love all the students in our class. And only 18% of the offers of admission we give out in any given year, that was last year, I don't know, 16 to 18% in any given year, go to early decision candidates. It's a larger percentage of the class because they all are committed, and everybody we admit regular decision isn't going to choose us. We think they should, but they don't all. So only 16 to 18% of our offers of admission are going to go to early decision candidates in a normal year. Who knows how that's going to go this year, but there are going to be plenty of opportunities for students who apply regular decision, and Hamilton may still be their top choice. And there are ways to indicate that to us through these essays and interviews. So don't feel pressure to do early decision, but if you really want to go early decision, you got to trust yourself also, even with less information available to you.
And can I just add, as an additional reassurance for aid applicants, the financial aid of students eligible to receive early decision is identical as the financial aid they'd be eligible to receive regular decision. So there's no difference from my vantage point, from our room where it happens, where we're doing our needs analysis and determining your aid eligibility for the year. There's no advantage or disadvantage to applying under one admission application round or another.
We're going to meet 100% of your demonstrated need either way.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So that leads us to financial aid. And you talked a little bit earlier, Cameron, about the process for applying, what we consider about the appeals. Some questions have come in specifically asking us to demystify it. I think you've done a good job with that throughout the evening, but specific questions around if financial aid will cover housing and then additional expenses. And then another person asked if they don't apply for financial aid in the first year, can they do so in subsequent years? So I wonder if you could take a couple of those questions.
Sure, very good questions. So as Monica indicated, we meet 100% of demonstrated need. We meet need up to what's called a cost of attendance. And cost of attendance includes billable things like tuition, room, board, student activity fee, and it also includes non-billable things like books and travel to and from campus. Because we recognize that it doesn't do families a lot of good for us to only meet your billable needs and then say, good luck finding your books. So we factor books and travel and certainly room and board. All of our students are required to live on campus for all 4 years. That is all factored into the financial aid award that we would put out to students and families. For domestic applicants seeking aid, if they do not apply for aid on the front end, coming in as a first-year student, you may certainly apply in future years. For our international applicants, that's a population for whom we are need sensitive or need aware, and they are not eligible to seek financial aid in subsequent years if they don't indicate that they're seeking aid in their first year.
Okay, great. And if there are questions that they can't answer through our frequently asked questions on our website or the net price calculators, and they're on the front end of this process, they can call us, right?
You can call us, or you can always send us an email at finaid@hamilton.edu.
Okay, great. And before we move from the application process in general, a couple questions came in tonight. One was, how many people read an application? Peaches, I'll take a stab at this. I would say at least 3.
Yes.
And so we read in partner reviews. So someone owns a territory, they always have a partner who reads with them, and it always gets passed to someone else, usually Peaches or myself. But it's not uncommon at all for an applicant to be read by 4 or 5 or 6 sets of eyes before we're done in various stages of our process. Is that a fair assessment?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
And they're asking how long do we take on an application, and a long time. Not probably as much time as you spend on it. Hopefully, we hope you're spending good quality time. We are too. The first read is going to take generally at least a half an hour, 20 minutes to half an hour, but it's 2 people, so you multiply that times 2. And then it's getting other eyes and other review and all the context that we look at. So we're spending a lot of time on it, and we're reading the essays you write, we're reading your teacher recommendations, and we're really spending time with all of that. And we're counting on you to do the same. Okay, we are getting near the end, so I'm going to move a little quickly. But this is a really big question. It's probably the #1 question we're getting this year. It's been way overplayed by the media. And the question is, what about all those people who are supposed to be freshmen this year who deferred their admission to next year? Are they taking up spots from the applicants who are applying this year? And does that mean it's going to be harder to get in next year? Peaches.
No, we will have available spots at regular decision. I think that Monica, we always laugh about this one because again, the media has created this, this storm of like, oh my gosh, there will not be any spots because of all the students who deferred. I mean, at Hamilton specifically, we defer between 5 and 10 students every year. And we did not change that. We actually were very upfront with students this year about, if you are exploring the possibility of taking gap year and you've always been considering this, then continue with the process. But if you're uncertain about what will happen this fall, have trust in us. And I think it's about that, relationship that we build with students. I also think that we're very fortunate that we have a January entry program. So we did have students who were unable to come into the fall due to COVID impacted situations, whether that was limited travel and mobility for our international students, or students that are coming from other places across the country where that were greatly impacted. And so we were able to defer students to January entry as well. So again, I think the thing is that in the end, this is not going to be impacting the number of students that we admit for the fall of 21.
Yep, good answer. I think in general, colleges want to balance their enrollment. They want to spread it out over multiple years, and they want to be full. And so if they have a smaller freshman class this year, they're going to have a larger freshman class next year so that they can have a full enrollment on campus, take advantage of the faculty and the facilities, and they budget around that. So rest assured that there are going to be plenty of spots to go around next year for students, and they shouldn't worry about this. Similarly, there was a question about whether we will take more students early decision. I don't think so. That remains to be seen. I would guess there will be fewer early decision candidates this year because students have not had as much time or opportunity to visit schools. And as a result, there may be more regular decision candidates, but we'll see how it plays out in our pool. These are things, though, that are beyond students' control. And so I appreciate your questions because you want to know how things are going to be different. We don't necessarily know the answers yet. And I would say just put together the best application you can, control what you can control, and don't overly worry about some of those things that sometimes get overplayed in the media. Okay, we're almost out of time. We're kind of out of time, but we're gonna, if people will stay with us, we'll stay a couple more minutes because I want to give you a chance, each of you, Peaches and Cameron, and maybe you can I can combine this question. I was going to ask you if there are any silver linings about the pandemic, and any parting advice. And if you wanted to throw in a common mistake people make that you'd like this group to avoid, feel free to do that too. Cameron, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. It's a wonderful question, and I've been reflecting a lot on that question, as I think have many of us, especially who work in the education space, since March, is where is the silver lining in everything that's going on? And it occurred to me actually the other day when I was talking to my little kids who are in elementary school about going to school, and they only go to school 2 days a week. And I know some of you might be in that same type of situation, and then they're home with us the other 3, and they now crave the time in the classroom, and they crave the ability to go to school. And that's something I'm really holding on to. And I think there is potential for a silver lining there, because I think a lot of us, high schoolers to elementary schoolers to college students, we crave the ability to go back to a normal classroom, go back to our campus, go back to our friends, certainly. And hopefully that is something we can keep with us. I'm going to try really hard to keep that with my little kids all the way through their education, because it wasn't that way last year. Even at the elementary level, my kids weren't dying to go to school every day. It was that same sort of put on your coats, let's go sort of thing. And now that conversation has totally changed. It's something they look forward to in the way they used to look forward to their weekend. So I'm hoping that it ends up being the silver lining. The one piece of advice that I have for all of you, and I'll speak specifically to any aid applicants out there, is don't hesitate to reach out to us. We are here and we're willing and able to work with you at any stage of this process. Even if you're not sure Hamilton is going to end up on your final list, I may give you a little grief over that, but we still want to have a conversation. I'm here to help you, for lack of better words, demystify this process, because financial aid in particular can feel a little overwhelming. And a lot of us in financial aid speak in vague acronyms and in opaque terms that don't necessarily mean anything to you. And so we strive to be an acronym-free zone in the financial aid office. We will talk to you about kind of whatever you want to talk about. And we're here to be a resource to hopefully make this process a little bit more manageable for you.
It's great. Thank you, Cameron. Peaches, you're up.
I think the silver lining would be the fact that before students' mobility was limited, has been limited as a result of pandemic. And so, so they haven't been able to visit campus physically. However, this time has allowed them to virtually engage with schools. So they could travel, they can go to California in the morning or in the evening and be in New York during the mornings. The idea that they have more access, the fact that they can look at multiple schools and not just simply limit themselves with particular region because it's easier to travel in some ways. And I also think for admissions officers, we're able to connect with students from around the world that we may not have been able to before because of the fact that that we are traveling virtually now. I know that one of my colleagues specifically was like, I met 2 kids in Alaska today. And she said, and I'll be in Connecticut in the morning. I mean, so, you know, having the excitement from admissions officers to be able to really travel and engage and create more access for students to do research into schools has been one of the silver linings I've seen through the process. In regards to the parting advice, I would have to echo Cameron. We are definitely here. We love talking to students. We want to help them and support them and their families through this process. So definitely being in touch with us is something that's really important. I think that building those relationships are extremely important, especially now.
Great. Thank you both. You did a great job answering the questions from our families. I'm going to chime in with my own silver lining, which is to say, this is a good news and a bad news, but I think that college admission will never be the same. And there are parts of it that I am going to miss, but I think we have learned a lot, speaking about what Peaches just said, about how to serve students better, to engage with students who we may never have been able to connect with before. We've removed barriers in the process, like the standardized testing, that I think will make Hamilton more accessible to more students. And I feel really proud of that. And I think as a profession, college admission and financial aid has been super sensitive to students this year. And I hope the students feel that and feel supported through events like this one. I would say the number one mistake I see students make is that they eliminate a school because of the sticker price. And I think we've talked enough about financial aid tonight that you know how generous we are and the tools that are available to you and the resources as well. And we hope that you'll consider Hamilton fully if a financial aid may be required for you, and other colleges as well that may be generous. And then for parting advice, I guess I would say, I'm really proud of the students who are looking at colleges right now. I started there and I want to end there by saying you are demonstrating your resilience. And you are staying focused, you are showing up for our events, you are tuning in tonight, you are moving forward with applications. You don't always have the mentors and the guidance counselors and the people around you, but you are staying true to your goals, you are undeterred. I said to the admission office earlier that every generation has their moment, and this is yours. And we are counting on you. We're going to be there for you, and we're really proud of you. So I'm going to finish where I started with our motto, which is know thyself. So use this process to be self-reflective, think about your goals, plan for your future, and don't get rocked off that path because of the pandemic, okay? That's where I want to end. I think I got to most of the questions, but if we didn't, we're keeping track of them. As I mentioned before, we had 2 great admissions staff members who were in there trying to answer questions, keep track and follow up with the ones we couldn't get to. Thank you for staying with us. I'm sorry we went over the hour a little bit. We have more events planned. If you go to hamilton.edu/discover, you'll find some of the events that you can participate in to get to know Hamilton better. If you have questions about our application process for admission or financial aid, we have lots of frequently asked questions on our website that I think are helpful, but we have people like ourselves who are there to answer your questions at admission@hamilton.edu or finaid@hamilton.edu. We stand ready to answer your questions, and we look forward to reading your applications. Good luck to everyone, and thanks for tuning in tonight.